Thanks to Google Play for sponsoring today's video. And that's how a living pink sentient goo is the single element tying together the last 8 years of games and 20 plus books. I fell asleep at my computer while working on a script again, didn't I?
No, you have been summoned by the sacred ring. A ring that will grant you whatever your heart truly desires.
Great, awesome. Can it write my next year's worth of scripts?
No.
But that's my heart's desire. Can I get a vacation?
No.
Seriously? What can I ask it for then?
You can be a hero. Go on an epic quest. Save a world in peril.
Sounds more like that's your desire, and I'm just here so you don't actually have to do any of the work.
Maybe the ring can try someone else.
Yeah, maybe you just move on. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, where each episode is a literal adventure waiting for you inside your pocket, provided you're watching on a mobile device. Speaking of mobile devices, today's episode is sponsored by Google Play. I gotta admit, that one right there, that's pretty exciting. Especially since Google Play is literally my go-to place for anything that I need on my phone. In case you've missed it, Google Play is the online store where people can discover all their new favorite games, apps, and entertainment for their Android devices. Considering that I'm constantly looking for new games and movies to talk about, I am always here. My entire collection of superhero films, here. Novelized animatronic adventures, here. Games for the channel, my personal life, and for Ollie, here, and here. I am literally like their highest tier member, I use it so often. It's also the place to find the latest, greatest games that you'll want to play on the go. Case in point, our topic for today, Octopath Traveler, Champions of the Continent. A brand new choose-your-own-adventure JRPG from Square Enix, who, let's be honest, are legendary within this genre. Let's also be honest, the best way to find the time to play a JRPG? Mobile. Anyway, the main premise is that you're a traveler who's selected as the chosen one by a ring of divine power. I literally just logged on and already I'm #winning. Clearly this ring has got itself some excellent taste. Except there's no such thing as a free lunch, or free divine ring, I suppose. Now that you're the chosen one, you have to take down 3 powerful tyrants who have their own divine rings. Only then can you collect all that jewelry, rise, and become the lord of the... Well, you get the point. But don't worry, you're not alone. Along the way, you recruit a team of eccentric party members that'll help you when the battles get tough, and they will get tough. Each tyrant is obsessed with one key vice: wealth, power, or fame, and it's up to you which order you tackle them in. Also, can I just ask, why does every bad guy in a JRPG look like the most hardcore theater kid ever? And I should know, I was one of them. Someone slapped that picture into a JRPG. The TLDR is that this game has the feel of the old school RPGs that I loved growing up, and the modern 2.5D look that makes the pixel art really pop. And best of all, it's an honest mobile RPG that's not designed from the outset to squeeze every dollar possible out of you, which, when talking about mobile games, is kind of an important distinction to make. This is traditional RPGing. There's some grinding, but nothing that feels unfair. And any truly traditional RPG deserves itself a traditional game theory episode. So today I'm here to tell you that classic game theory thesis we all love so well: the hero is the villain, actually. You see, the game makes it very clear that the 3 tyrants we're going up against are really awful and committing all these atrocious misdeeds, but we're also explicitly told that their reigns of terror are only made possible thanks to the divine rings that they wear, which bestow upon them the power of the gods. Now, remind me, who else has a ring like this? Oh yeah, it's us. In narrative storytelling, one ring just being arbitrarily different and good from all the other ones just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And taking a look at our actions throughout the start of this game, I'm not convinced that we're all that different from the so-called villains that we're tasked with taking out. In fact, I think it's pretty darn clear. If these 3 were so easily corrupted by the power of the rings, then it shouldn't be hugely surprising that we also suffered the same fate. So with all that in mind, let me take all of these branching pathways and bring them back together to show you why I suspect we are in fact the real villain of the new Octopath Traveler. Also, because we're talking about some key story elements from this new game, spoiler alert from here on out. First, let's take a look at the guys that we're tasked with fighting. Titus, the master of power and the leader of a military army formed of criminals; Herminia, the master of wealth who runs the local mafia; and Auguste, the master of fame and murderous playwright. But these are far from one-note mustache-twirling villains. Their backstories are full of tragedy and trauma. As we proceed through Auguste's story, for instance, we learn that his wife was stolen and murdered by his former boss, which thereby set Auguste on a quest for revenge. Herminia's story is even more tragic. Her sisters took her inheritance and sold her off to a distant land where she had to sell her body in order to survive. Eventually, she clawed her way up through the ranks of the mafia, ultimately becoming the godmother and getting revenge on her family. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that these characters aren't bad guys. They are clearly killers and criminals. Their traumatic pasts don't forgive their present atrocities, and they've enacted just as much, if not more, pain on others than they themselves experienced when growing up. But knowing a bit about their histories does make you think differently about how we handle the situation. For both battles, we just roll up and enact our own brand of justice by wiping everyone out. And I have to ask, how is that any better than what they're doing? Is killing these two really the best way to stop them? At the very least, they deserve to stand trial for their crimes so the victims and the families can get closure. Instead, they get us, a vigilante empowered by a divine ring, striking them down. How's that any better than them? We just kill whoever we please in order to complete our mission, which is exactly what Auguste and Herminia do. It's also clear that we're not particularly worried about the people that we're quote-unquote saving, or the consequences of our actions. In the Herminia storyline, for instance, we aren't just tracking down a mafia boss, we are actively working alongside a rival mafia in an effort to put them in charge of the town. They claim to have good intentions, but they still call themselves the Mafia. How good can they be? And as you'd expect, when you remove a big mafia boss from power, even if a new one takes over, there's gonna be others trying to fill the power vacuum. The new Don even tells us that we wouldn't have gotten this far without you. So how on earth are they gonna lead the town and survive when we move on to the next quest line? All it takes is someone bigger and badder to come along and suddenly they're gonna be done for. And we don't even have to talk in hypotheticals. Later in the game, we get to come back to the town a year after we were last there, and what do we see? A new big bad has entered the arena, and the government that we actively installed in the region is once again defenseless without our help. Who would have thunk it? If we truly wanted to help these poor people and their town, we'd have stuck around. Maybe helped out the new leaders to make sure everything's on track before we pieced out. But nope, we got what we came for, and we are gone. We only happen to come back because this new threat has yet another ring for us to collect. That ain't acting like a hero, friends. That is acting like a giant purple raisin man collecting rainbow gemstones for his power bracelet. Or, to use this game as our example, it's literally acting no better than the three big bads. During the Master of Fame path, we meet the lead actress of a show who, we're told, left her own son in order to follow the villain Auguste. That revelation prompts a very important question from one of our companions named Schwartz. He asks, quote, what about that man would make a person want to abandon the life of their own child? That's a fair question. I mean, Auguste is a serial killer, and yet he has legions of people loving and respecting him, following him. And this isn't the only time that we see this sort of thing happening in the game. Across all three stories, we see that the villains have accrued absolutely massive followings, be them fans, soldiers, or people just looking for a piece of that sweet, sweet gold. In the Master of Power path, when we defeat the villain Titus, he is remembered by the people as a hero. Are they just that important? Is the propaganda just that impressive? No, I believe it has everything to do with the power that the rings give them, because when you flip the script and take a look at our player character, a random traveler from nowhere, you can see the exact same thing starting to happen. We're told at the start of the game that should you seek companions for your travels, make your wish be known, and you do so by tapping on your divine ring. The original Japanese is a bit more direct, translating to, quote again, if you wish for help on your journey, then pray to the ring. When you do, you summon other travelers in order to amass a team from the 64 character roster. While these 64 characters do have backstories, you have to partake in special side quests in order to actually learn them. Initially, they just show up, they give us a brief introduction of who they are, and then they're just part of your team forever with no explanation as to why they're there. You just prayed to your magic ring and poof, here they are, ready to follow you on whatever quest, no questions asked, ready to fight any battle that you decide is just, no matter how dangerous. Maybe I should get a hold of one of those magic rings. Gets lonely down here in the recording closet. I should also point out that when you're asked to pick a story path that you want to go down, you aren't asked which villain you want to destroy. Instead, you're asked, what do you seek at Journey's End? And the options are just wealth, power, or fame. The same three things that we're accusing these villains of pursuing in their own storylines. Where are the options that say, destroy Titus, or free the locals, disassemble the mafia, end a reign of tyranny? Nope, none of that. Wealth, power, or fame. Make the choice just like the villains. They all obtained magic rings and pursued one of those endeavors. And that's exactly what we're doing too, friends. We're just going one step further and seeking all of those options. We're using the rings to do exactly what the enemies of the game did, just better. Mastering all three in order to take our place as the most famous hero in the land. So there you have it, the classic hero was the villain the whole time theory. Except, as I was writing that last paragraph, I realized something. We're told that these rings grant our deepest desires, and our response to that is pursuing one of the three selfish goals, wealth, fame, or power. What if my heart desire was, I don't know, becoming a crazy cat guy or something? And we're not just pursuing those goals, we're actively plowing through others in order to get them. That means that either we ourselves are selfish and no better than the villains, or more likely, the ring is the one controlling our decision in some way. Maybe the truth here is that we're not actually allowed to voice a desire all our own. Maybe we aren't the villain, the ring is. This This whole thing feels like a trap that's set by the ring, like we're being pushed into a desire or path that my character may not actually want to take. I wanted to go a little bit deeper into this, so I actually restarted my game just so I could go back through the intro cutscene. And when I did, something strange happened. I was now looking at a totally different character. I looked it up, and apparently this is an intended mechanic. Everyone that plays gets a different starting character, which I suppose allows for unique and interesting team building, but it also presents us with a bit of a problem. Each game gives you the same choice: wealth, power, or fame. But that can't be right. If you gathered 8 random people into a room, the chances of all of them wanting the same thing for their heart's desire are next to none. However, what's the one thing that unites all of these characters? What's the one thing that they all have in common when you start the game? They're given a divine ring. All this time I've been accusing the chosen one of not being a hero, that their desire is worse than that of the villains that we face throughout the initial story. But if you can literally be any character at the start of the game, well, this just proves that the ring is actually the one steamrolling our options. It's corrupting us from the opening seconds. Now, I know this might seem like a stretch to say that the ring is somehow controlling all these people, that it's just a gameplay mechanic, but you don't have to take my word for it. August basically tells us this after we defeat him and take the ring away from him. Finally, the ring, free from that abomination, I am released. Throughout his story, we're told not once, but twice that August has no desire for fame, despite being the master of fame. In fact, he refers to fame as snobbery. He's an artist. He wants to create amazing plays to help reveal the desires of man through his work. He is not doing it for the fame, but the ring is the thing that's forcing him to. August's ring corrupted him and forced him to follow not his own desires, but rather its own desires. The exact same choice that we find ourselves presented with at the start of the game, pursuing one of 3 dark desires, but never given the option to choose something else. Okay, so clearly these rings have power over the user, but can I really say that they have their own desires? The answer is yes, because these aren't just any rings, they're divine rings. Rings that came from a god or are godlike. Now, this is an important detail to keep in mind when looking at the final form for each of the game's major bosses. Each one is named after one of the 8 primary gods from the original Octopath Traveler. August becomes Prince of Thieves, Titus becomes the Thunderblade, and Herminia becomes the Huntress, the exact same titles as 3 of Orstera's gods. We later learn that these rings aren't just powered by these specific gods, they are these specific gods. And it makes sense too. Brand the Thunderblade, for instance, is the god that offers the warrior class in the original Octopath. Titus gets this ring and then pursues becoming an all-powerful warrior. So what about our ring then? Well, after you beat the initial 3 villains, we're told that our ring is Aelfric, Flamebringer's ring. Aelfric, like the other gods, grants a particular class in the original Octopath, the Cleric, basically a white mage that specializes in healing and light magic. But Aelfric is also one of the few gods where we get some of his extra backstory. You see, they're the one that imprisoned the evil 13th god by calling down fire from the heavens, which became known as the Sacred Flame. This led the Order of the Sacred Flame to be formed, an order which essentially runs the country. Although not all people are religious, the order is super important to the running and governing of the continent. We see in the game that they have an army, that they can elect individuals into positions of power like they do with Titus. And in the Master of All path, we even discover that the Order supervised a non-aggression pact between the various kings of the continent. The Order runs this place. The priests of Aelfric are the ones with all the power. But then suddenly, these other gods start using people. They start turning them into godlike beings in order to amass their own followings. Titus literally wants to overthrow the Order of the Sacred Flame. So what happens? Well, Aelfric gets us to go in and re-establish the status quo, stopping Titus's coup, pulling August and Herminia from their positions of power to help restore the Order as the most important thing in the land. This isn't about saving the people, it's about making sure that Aelfric is still the most worshipped god on the continent. That's why it doesn't matter which character you start the game off as. You aren't the important one here. As long as someone does the job, Aelfric gets exactly what he wants. And if Aelfric isn't all that great, maybe that 13th god wasn't so evil after all in the original Octopath. But that, my fellow travelers, is a theory for another day. In the meantime, remember, it's all just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching. And thanks one final time to Google Play for sponsoring this video. I love it when we get brand deals like this because it gives me an excuse to make time for games that I wouldn't usually have a chance to talk about on the channels. I grew up with JRPGs, but haven't had much chance to play them lately because life is busy, you know? So when Google Play approached me and asked me to make a video about their latest releases, I jumped at the chance. Octopath Traveler, Champions of the Continent was a fantastic way to hop back into the genre. Obviously, the story and characters are a lot of fun, but the 8-party battle system gets real deep. The strategies they have to figure out to make sure that all your bases are covered while also having enough super effective moves to take down your opponent, that's the exact type of challenge that I love in video games. So if you want to check out Octopath Traveler, Champions of the Continent, it's available for free on Google Play via the link in the description. Go over there and tell them that Game Theory sent you. And I'm being serious about that. Go down to their comments, the reviews, whatever, whatever, and tell them that I sent you. Spam the comments saying that so they know that I pushed a lot of you over there, and then they can be all like, whoa, MatPat and his community are really passionate, let's do more stuff with them. Because honestly guys, it's a win-win for all of us. You get yourself a great free game, I get myself an excuse to play a game that doesn't have animatronics in it, and creative teams that have worked hard on these awesome experiences find themselves a loving new audience. So thank you to Google Play for sponsoring this video, and thank you for watching and going over there to comment. As always, my friends, I'll see you all next week.